Free agency looms as we already get some insights around potentially departing veterans from this Brooklyn Nets roster. We break down what it means in the short term as Patty Mills opts out and how the Nets will look to fill the void moving forward. All coming up right after the theme music.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it's the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Over there is Doug Norrie. Over here is Adam Armbrecht. We thank you for making us your first listen today, free on all those great platforms. Let you know that the Locked On Nets podcast is partnered with Arcade 1UP to give away 3 free NBA Jam Shaq Edition machines. That's right. 3 of them are going to be out there. These are the guys who are known for making incredible retro 3/4 scale at-home arcade games like Pac-Man, Golden Tee, and many more. Enter to win at arcade1up.com/lockedon. That's arcade1up.com/lockedon for your chance to win one. Hey, Doug, speaking of winning one, why don't we go ahead and win one off season or win one free agent period? Win something, I guess, in Brooklyn as free agency is impending, but we already had, as we talked about yesterday, deadline for Patty Mills to opt in to his player option, and he opted out.
Yeah, I think Brian Lewis was from the New York Post was the first to scoop this one. I'm pretty sure. I've been following Twitter with Woj and Shams and everybody pretty closely today, but I'm pretty sure Brian Lewis was the first to get it that Patty Mills had declined his $6.2 million player option going into the $6.184 and $500 player option, to be very specific, had declined that option going into next year. A little bit surprising. We're going to talk about what it kind of means for the team. We haven't heard sometimes with these player option stuff, the way it's reported, you'll hear, I'll just give an example. James Harden declining his $47 million player option to restructure a new deal to like a team friendly deal so they can bring in more talent. Like that's how that player declining a player option is sort of coded. With Patty, it was just that he declined the option. I mean, what do you think with that mean? I feel like I know what that means. And look, we're recording this in the evening. We wanted to get this out as soon as possible. There's a chance more news comes in. Right now, we're just going to have to guess at it. But I think I know what this means.
For me, I think that it means he saw through his agent or otherwise that there's an opportunity for him to maximize his value on the market right now, right?
Yeah.
We talked about it when they initially signed him, how the reason why it was a steal, not just from a player standpoint, it felt like an insane value on the 2-year with the player option, a deal that he initially came into Brooklyn with. After a season like this, where he was used to the maximum and still shot to his averages, specifically from beyond the arc, when you look around the NBA landscape, no team, I think probably more than the Brooklyn Nets goes, you know what's hard is to continue to have short guys in our backcourt because we kind of got a lot of them. But another team can see incredible value there, and I don't think that Patty Mills can afford to pass up the opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's where it lands. I think that probably means that's the end of his time in Brooklyn. I'm happy to be wrong about it if it's for the right number. Usually players don't decline player options unless like you said before, significantly more money is coming in the door or more years. Like, I mean, that which means more money, but like it might be a haircut on the per year money, but like spread out over a couple more years. So there's a little more safety in it, something like that. There are a few other reasons why you decline the player option. In general, though, it means that you're apart from something on like either restructuring a deal, re-signing. You know that the market's better. You don't want to play there anymore. I mean, like, who could blame him? This year has been sort of weird. Like, it wouldn't shock me if it's just like, hey, man, I'm getting long in the tooth here. My NBA career is not going to be forever. This has been a massive headache with some of this stuff. And there's other teams that don't have the same headache. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for a guy like Patty Mills, consummate professional, gave everything he could to the Nets, like to look at the situation and say, the grass is legit greener somewhere else. Again, that's guessing, but I wouldn't be shocked by that.
I think that this might be one of those things, and blame need not be placed, but one of the pieces in terms of fallout around some of the dysfunction and the decision-making with Kyrie and all the speculation, right? If you're a veteran guy, to your point, who's closer to the end than the beginning, Patty Mills didn't sign on for this. Patty, by the way, he didn't sign up for what happened last year. He signed on to be a guy who's playing, giving you 20 to 25, maybe a game, being a real strong veteran presence, an ear to lean on for young players, and then knocking down some sweet buckets when it mattered most, right?
Yep.
Instead, it was, hey, do you mind carrying the load for us? So, last year's sample size might have been something for Patty where he said, hey, I still have value out there on the market, and I didn't expect this to be the version of it. And then once the back half of the season happens, the James Harden trade happens, and this whole off season, I get it. Like, again, to your point, like I'll be happy to be wrong because I think there's value there. Although I will say, we can get into it here in a little bit about, is this better for the Brooklyn Nets in terms of what it may inspire them to do here in free agency? But I think it makes sense for Patty Mills, the player.
Yeah, I think so too. And it could be just a mutual decision, right? It's like, hey, we just, go explore something else. If you can get another extra year on a contract, like you can get 2 years out of someone else, like go do that. The Nets might just not be in the market to want to do something like that. We saw that his, at least like what they need from a playoff and championship level run, like he's not exactly what they need come, crunch time playoff minutes. And if they're seeing a situation where, we're getting Joe Harris back, Kyrie Irving is going to play every game, or, relatively speaking, we have Durant, we have Simmons, like, and frankly, actually, maybe most importantly, we have Seth Curry. Like when those are the guys that are there, Patty Mills really, really becomes expendable on the roster. It's actually just like not what they need at all anymore. Like they don't need another smaller 3-point shooter. They need bigger wings. They need a bigger body underneath. Like these are like their needs are not undersized shooting guards that are just only shooting guards that are essentially spot up 3-point shooters. And like, that's it. That's just not the archetype of player that the Nets need right now. And they definitely don't need it at $6 million. And so as good as he was, again, though, if it was just a financial decision for him, like he could still have picked it up, right? Like he could still have just gone and picked up the $6 million and said, hey, that's just what we're going to do. It doesn't really matter what the Nets want or what they don't want, right? I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to be a net here. Like, so, cause that's totally within his purview. That's the whole point of the option. So I do think that's just going to mean we're going to hear another piece of news, not to, maybe 6 p.m. tomorrow, something like that, when actual free agency starts, that there's some other deal in place for him somewhere else. Cause remember, the other dirty little secret, and it's not even a secret with this free agency stuff, is like everyone already knows, right? Like everyone pretty much, if it's relevant,
Brooklyn not blindsided that
no. Everyone knows, everyone pretty much knows what you were going to do with your option. And more specifically, though the free agency technically starts at 6 p.m. on Thursday, even everyone kind of knows about that stuff too. Like it's just this is how the league works. Yes, that's when it officially starts, but most conversations have already been had between all these teams and agents and everybody else to know what the landscape for Patty Mills is, what the market is for him, what the exact number is, what the years are. Like these players never go into this stuff blind to be like, let's see how it goes. Here comes the dice roll. No, that's just not, these guys already.
Come on, baby.
Ooh, let's go 20.
I am a Houston Rocket. Shoot.
That's my D&D. That's my D&D reference. 20-sided die shooting for 20. So anyway, that's kind of like how we need to look at this situation. In a second, we'll talk about why this is probably not the worst thing maybe for either side in this situation, what this can mean for the Nets if more money and more roster spots are opening up off the books. First, going to talk to you about our friends over at Arcade One. Adam mentioned this at the beginning, and this is something you just got to get into. NBA Jam is back. Arcade One Up is the leader in home retro arcade games, and it's not only bringing back the best game ever, but they made it even bigger with, wait for it here, a Shaq Edition machine. It's one of the first sports games ever to feature real and digitized NBA licensed teams. NBA Jam was the absolute jam back in the day. If you can remember, if you're as old as me, you definitely know he's heating up as part of the just the overall vernacular. No fouls, no free throws, and no quarters required. Compete with friends and family throughout all new Wi-Fi leaderboards, making you more connected than ever. You can pre-order now from arcade1up.com. It's arcade1up.com for an estimated early September ship time, just $399. You have to check this out. They also have other ones like Golden Tee, Mortal Kombat. So there's other names that Arcade One Up has gotten into here. And they're giving away the NBA Jam Shaq Edition to a Locked On listener. You can enter for a chance to win your game console for your man cave at arcade1up.com/locked-on. That's arcade, the number 1, up.com/locked-on. You got until July 8th to enter to win the NBA Jam Shaq Edition console, arcade1up.com/locked-on.
So this was the first big, obviously, piece that, shame on me. And Kyrie Irving happened to be the first big piece. And by the way, he officially did opt in. That was something that the pen got put to paper on that one.
Yes.
But Patty Mills exiting out. Let's just, we're going to
It's funny, real quick. It's funny about that because it's funny that you have to clarify that. But with Kyrie, you feel like you do. It's like, hey, just so everyone knows, he did sign the paperwork. He did. I know he didn't just call himself legendary, and that it's like not like Michael Scott yelling, I declare bankruptcy, like in the middle of the office, and there's like that's not actually how you do it. Like you actually have to sign the paper. Anyway, yeah, he did actually sign.
Well, and by the way, because somebody said too, it was like, I'm opting in, see you in the fall. And I think a lot of people were like, well, just to be clear, behind closed doors, there's actually a little bit more discussion that's going to be going on around what the expectations are come the fall, right? So bottom line being, you have him back. Patty Mills looks like he's going to go to the market, and I would think is not going to be returning. Does that now, where do you just go in the backcourt specifically? We know you have Cam Thomas there. We know they're looking to bring back in. They have the two-way contract to utilize maybe for a DDJ. Do you think that this is going to inspire an MLE situation here where they're looking on the market and looking for another veteran to bring in there? We mentioned yesterday, Goran Dragic presumably is going to go to Dallas to meet up with Luka. So there's going to be a little bit of a void back there at a position that even though they had a lot of players, they didn't have the right player, ball handler, facilitator that I think you want to have in behind some of these other guys.
Yeah, you're going to hope that it's an MLE. Maybe it's an Isaiah Hartenstein. We talked about him the other day. That's a guy who's kind of been thrown around here. There are other mid-level options. I think we'll have a better look. It's a little hard to speculate too much on that right at this moment, just because there are a bunch of different options. I don't think it's going to be a guy like Mills, though. Like I said, I don't think it's going to be a smaller guard. They have to just take a stab on somebody else, bigger, longer, like just can defend a different position, is just a center, somebody like that.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say, though, was does Mills exiting say there's a profile of backcourt player that we want to pursue? Need not have a name, but just, hey, something has to plug in here that we don't have right now.
They just have to be bigger. They have to be longer. They have to be able to defend like a few other positions. Again, remember, they already have two sort of undersized guys on the roster that they're going to get playing time short of a trade. Like Kyrie and Seth Curry already are like not the biggest dudes in the world, but are pretty valuable for what the Nets want to do. So if you already assume that those guys are going to get actual real minutes here, like you start to just have a cap on, and especially too, if Ben Simmons is going to be more of a primary ball handler, like you just don't need that kind of guy as much. And if you're just looking to stretch the court, Joe Harris has that too. We need bigger wings that can just defend a few more positions. Like I wouldn't look, if they brought back Patty Mills, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I think like we just know it would just be a situation where we know exactly what they were going to get, right? Like it's.
Can I say like change for the sake of change is kind of a vibe that I have inside of myself around the Nets.
I was gonna say you're all about like, hey, if we can just swap it like just for something different. So and then next year we'll just do something different again. That's a total Adam Armbrecht like go to. It's like, oh, why do you want to do it? Because it's different. Like that's why it's just someone new to talk about. Like just because something new to dream on.
I'll put into a context around keeping something the same. Do you think that his exit, and we know this is open market for a player like Bruce Brown, but do you think that connection of, now here's a guy that we always label as this weird mixed match position, but he is a backcourt player. He can handle the ball to whatever extent. The perimeter shooting is coming along, it looks like. I think that makes it maybe more likely that they'd like to retain him and keep that stability. So I got
this
one
is like
change, one keep.
2 days in a row where I just forgot like a key player on the team when I was referencing a bunch of different situations. Hey, look, leave the mistakes in. It's punishment. I'll learn to live with the mistakes here. Yesterday it was just like totally glossing over the fact that Ben Simmons was on the team, and then today it's
defensive weakness. I don't know.
Okay, in my defense here, Bruce Brown is not technically on the team. Like come free agency, we don't know what is going to happen with him. All signs do point to them wanting to bring him back. And this probably helps, facilitate a little bit more money to that end also. Like, and Bruce Brown too, if like you start believing that the 3-point shooting for him at the end of the season was real, like, because the last third of the season, he was like one of the best 3-point shooters in basketball, like not just on the Nets. He was one of the very best spotted 3-point shooters in the whole game. It was probably a little run hot, but it's hard to be that if it's not a little bit real, right? So if you feel like his outside game is actually progressing a little bit, and he gives you significantly more on the defensive end, and frankly, maybe even on the offensive end with his versatility, like then it actually just becomes a numbers crunch, just where these guys end up playing too. So again, Let me ask you this. Would you rather have Bruce Brown or Patty Mills play more minutes for the Nets next year?
Exactly. It's Bruce Brown, right?
Right.
It's going to be Bruce Brown 8 days a week. And on top of which, I think extending beyond the position, although Cam Thomas falls in that category, to your point, Bruce Brown improved 3-point shooting down the stretch. Cam Thomas didn't show the perimeter shooting that we know he's capable of coming out of college. We expect that to get a little bit better. And then someone like Kessler Edwards, we think is going to get more consistent in his second season as well, specifically from beyond the arc. So even across the roster as a whole, right? You can look around and then the health of Joe Harris, if he's still on this roster, Seth Curry, you look around and you go, yeah, you know what we have? We do have perimeter shooters here. That's not what we lack. To your point, we lack a guy that can, on both ends of the floor, not have us go on a possession to possession basis. And it's not picking on just Patty Mills. There's several examples of this on the roster where you go, well, yeah, you could do that, but just don't ask him to do these 4 other things, because that's going to be a problem. That's what I think the Nets, as we've talked about, need to get away from. And that's where I think some of these roster shakeups are a necessity just to swap out. And we also talked about this. Patty Mills, for whatever his value or skill set is, the fact that you have Kevin Durant, you have Kyrie Irving, and you have Ben Simmons, when you look out at the landscape of what's going to be available, big splash or small ML contract, every player that you profile gets elevated by playing with the superstars, right? So the skill set only needs to fit in and around what these guys do. That's not something that every free agent you can plug and play on any random team and say, yeah, they're going to have a much easier time in whatever their skills are.
Yeah, 100%. Like I'm totally with that line of thinking. And also just like along these lines, because I kind of skipped over this week, where we skipped over this at the beginning. There was news on Kessler Edwards also. Like the Nets actually did decline the team option on Edwards, but the idea is that they're going to tender him a contract and make him and bring him back come free agency. Like, so he's going to be back on the team also. Yes. So like just adding some of these other pieces back into the mix. Like, so once you put Kessler in there, once you put Bruce Brown maybe in there, maybe Claxton's also, like the roster begins to round out, and maybe Patty Mills sees the writing on the wall there too. And it's like, hey, maybe I just know I'm not going to play as much next year. Right. Like there's like,
right, I opt in and I just end up on the bench buried.
Exactly. Like maybe that's just not the situation they need. Maybe he looks at like a Boston or a team that has a thinner bench. Like maybe you're looking like for a situation where the team is good, but the bench is just, significantly thinner, frankly, like the Lakers too. Like these teams where that could have like mid-level options on their teams. And he just like, hey, I'll have a better role here overall. And maybe it's a little more stable. So I think he could look at that situation too. And when the Nets start, because again, too, like he probably has ideas around who they're going to bring back too. These like the dirtiest, like kept secrets. Like these are not, most people know sort of like what's going to happen right around now. So that's about it. I think that's just kind of where we land. I want to talk about this trade that happened also just real quick that affects the NBA, the Eastern Conference as well too, because I don't know, there's some dominoes falling here even as we speak.
And things that we referenced around being a possibility for the Nets to be involved in, right? That conversation that we want to get into. First, though, got to tell you, of course, about our friends over at Sakara. You heard Doug talk about these guys yesterday, and that's because there are 2 words that are going to be associated. It's going to be nutrition and food, value and health, and mental wellness and physical wellness. All those components go together, my friends. That's because feeling your best starts with what you eat. Sakara helps you live a healthy, balanced lifestyle and truly enjoy it with delicious, plant-rich, transformational nutrition that builds the foundation for living in your best body. I don't know if I'm there yet, but I'm trying to get there with Sakara. Now is the time to seek wellness, joy, and abundance in all areas of your life, starting with what you eat. With Sakara, you get nutrient-dense meals and snacks along with supplements that nourish your body without ever sacrificing taste or quality. Sakara is a wellness company anchored in food as medicine. That's the key words. Food as medicine, my friend, helping you live a better life on a mission to nourish your body through the power of plants. Sakara gives you the tools you need to transform your life with their organic, ready-to-eat meal delivery program and functional wellness essentials. And right now, Sakara is offering our listeners 20% off on their first order when they go to sakara.com/lockedon20 or enter code lockedon20 at checkout. That's Sakara, SAKARA.com/lockedon20 to get 20% off your first order. Sakara.com/lockedon20. Trades, speaking of, Doug, one of the things we talked about is what is possible here. Hit me with the first one that involves the Atlanta Hawks, obviously, and then I do want to follow up. There is some level of rumor and speculation bubbling around the Phoenix Suns as well.
Yeah, okay, I was going to bring up the Suns one also. So there is a real trade that actually went through that does shift a little bit of the Eastern Conference. Dejoute Murray was traded from the Spurs to the Hawks. It was Danilo Gallinari. They sent out the Hawks sent out 2 first-round picks in 25 and 27. I think there's a couple pick swaps in there also. And they get Dejoute Murray to pair with Trae Young in the backcourt. I think that's interesting. I think that follows sort of like this is not the exact comp here, but it was like sort of like when the Rockets signed or traded for Chris Paul. And it was like, oh, that's weird. It's like kind of Chris Paul and James Harden. It's like, nah, just get the best players and then work out the fit later. Like if guys that are pretty versatile and can do a lot of different things, and it's not like Dejoute and Trey do the same thing at all either. So like, but another ball handler next to Trey, Hawks gave up some picks way off into the future. Collins was not involved in this trade, which I think was interesting because he had been rumored and we talked about him as possibly being gone. So I don't know. What were your quick thoughts on that trade, which I thought was, pretty interesting. It's like not ground shifting, but it's definitely like a really good player that shifts teams.
Yeah, a little bit more length, right? A little bit more defensive ability there if you're talking about pairing him with Trae Young in the backcourt. So I think it makes sense for Atlanta. And if you're Atlanta, you're trying to shift. You had this one kind of sexy season and then not so much. So I think they know they have their young star. The interesting part to me is, as you mentioned, John Collins not mentioned in that. And I will say there have been talks that the Spurs were going to be seeking 4 first-round picks. And you mentioned there's a couple of swap potentials there, but the asking price that maybe was being discussed did not necessarily get achieved from the San Antonio Spurs side, which if you're thinking about then John Collins, you can start to maybe wonder if he's going to be out of there, what is that asking price going to be? And is it something Brooklyn Nets or otherwise that teams can get involved in because it doesn't seem so steep?
Yeah, the asking price on some of these guys has been a little lower than I thought it was going to be. Like Dejoute with, for cap fodder and Gallo and a couple first rounders, Jeremy Grant for like a first round pick a year from now or 2 years from now. Christian Wood went for a pick this year. The asking prices around the picks does seem a little smaller than kind of what I thought some of the stuff was going to be. And if that's what they're commanding, John Collins is going to command significantly less than that, right? So it all of a sudden does start to look a little more realistic around some of these guys, not necessarily him, but just sort of understanding that these guys aren't getting huge packages put together to move them places. It's a good deal. I think it's a good deal for the Spurs. They're fully in the tank, whatever. It's a good deal for the Hawks. Like they upgrade their roster significantly. They're going to be a probably pretty good regular season team now, for sure. But so I totally get
like
it.
Win-win trades. Like I like wins that just make sense for trades that make sense for everybody, right? Like it's not some like horrible situation. Spurs know exactly where they are to your point. And it feels like, And by the way, get one of the better young players in the league, get him somewhere that there's going to be some excitement for the next season for him too. What about
Wait, real quick, let me just do 2 housekeeping things before you do the Suns thing. So Harden did opt out of his player option in Philly, but it's expected that he's just going to re-sign on a more team-friendly deal. That's just going to allow them to have more flexibility with who they sign. Also got the old, he's in the best shape of his life sort of tweet. You love to see those. Goodness. Finally trying. Just going to give it the old college try this time. Going to actually work. It was great. It was like started his workout program way earlier this year. Like awesome. Rooting for the guy for sure. And then the other one was Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal opted out of his player option, but he's probably just going to sign up like a mega max with a super max with the Wizards. So I mean, something weird could happen there, but I doubt it. Give us the Suns one, because there was a little rumblings in Suns and Nets Nation here.
It started out, it was so weird because I don't know. I was listening to a couple of people report say, Ayton, no, they're going to sort that out. He's not going anywhere. And then it quickly pivoted to, they're signing him and they're signing and trading him. It's just going to be a matter of where is he going to land and what are those packages going to look like. I'm fascinated by it because the Brooklyn Nets have been mentioned among the teams. They were also mentioned around John Collins. They've been mentioned around super sexy names like KJ Martin Jr. Watch out, friends. But the Ayton piece, what would Ayton to you? What does that mean to you if the Brooklyn Nets are actually in this? I think it opens up the discussion around Nicolas Claxton, the foregone conclusion that his contract is going to be signed. He's going to be coming back. But you would immediately think that that's a part of this package that Phoenix would be seeking to get Ayton in that opportunity.
Yeah, so this originally came from someone that's actually not associated with either the Nets or the Suns, but he is a real reporter. It's Washington Wizards insider Quentin Mayo, and he had responded that he had said something along the lines that he had heard some rumblings about an Ayton trade for Claxton, Harris, and Cam Thomas. And who knows if that's just something that was discussed between parties well under the top of any brass, or if it's actually a real thing. This would be super interesting, obviously. Again, we're only reporting something that a verified person is reporting themselves. These are people that this is not someone that's incentivized to kind of just make things up. So that's just not that kind of situation. But this would be one of those ground shifting pieces, right? If this would have happened, a guy like Ayton, if Ayton is your 4th best player or something like that, your team's awesome. And like, and if that's like the situation the Nets are kind of thinking about, then I don't know. I'm kind of here for that one. I don't think it's all that likely. And it's not something I ever probably would have even conjured up, but it's hard to look at this one and be like, no, I wouldn't do that. It's like a super young piece. Doesn't need to be your best player. Compare with a lot of different guys. Probably has room in his game to grow. I don't know. Is that where you kind of land with something like that?
Yeah, I think you mentioned the age piece because remember we were talking about the reason why John Collins was intriguing is based on the contract, and then also he's only 24 years old. So in the short term, it's great, and in the long term, you still have a piece. I think likewise for Ayton, and far different. I think it shifts to your point, shifts what I think about how he plugs in with Simmons, KD, and Kyrie, and you go, this is a force now. This is right back at the top of the Eastern Conference if you add him into the mix. And on top of which, as you mentioned yesterday, Cam Thomas, it's so funny, and any of these players, Joe Harris included, if you tell me, situation X unfolds, I say, that's why you want to have Joe Harris on this team. Really important player. Likewise for Cam Thomas. But if you tell me it's Deandre Ayton, I go, yeah, it turns out Nicolas Claxton, as exciting as he may be, need not be someone you cannot let go of, right? So, but it is just funny because I know it makes it sound like I or maybe we talk out of both sides of our mouths, but it's predicated on, well, what am I getting back? Saying, do you want Nicolas Claxton or do you want him to sign somewhere else in free agency? I want Nicolas Claxton back, right? So everything is relative to what you can get in return. And by the way, I'll tell you right now from a partnership standpoint, because we often talk about these trades and say, got to be careful. A lot of other teams can offer some really enticing packages. That's a really good package for the Phoenix Suns to get back. Nicolas Claxton, length, can run the floor, defensive versatility, Joe Harris, sharpshooter, and then a young 3-level scorer like Cam Thomas for a team that wants to reload themselves and was a little bit disappointed in the results last playoffs. Like, that's where I actually think maybe that's a feasible possibility because the Nets actually have the right assets to entice Phoenix.
Yeah, it's close. I think there's probably other teams that could probably pony up something else. Look, you got to pay him too. Like, he's a restricted free agent. Like, this is part of the problem that they're having in Phoenix was they didn't pay him last offseason. And now he's like unhappy with it. And the season didn't end the way they wanted it to. So there's like other pieces that are sort of going along here with why Ayton wants, like, or could want out, or why they could feel like they're not gonna be able to bring him back. Cause like, he's a restricted free agent this year, but they declined to pay him like max dollars when they basically had the chance, and he's unhappy, and that kind of ended weird. And like, if he's gonna walk for nothing in a year, then like, then they got to try to get something for him now in a sign and trade.
And oh, by the way, you have Booker there, obviously in Phoenix, but we know Chris Paul is older. I think, again, any package that they want to get, it makes a lot of sense to have a combination of youth and experience because, like, Phoenix can also be thinking about this short and long term. How do we make ourselves reloaded and be effective and go for a title in this small window and make sure we have some young talent as well? So it'd be fascinating, man. But I'll leave it on this. Incredibly important, we said last episode, to have the Brooklyn Nets be in these conversations, to hear this team getting mentioned around big names like this. They are. So that means that Sean Marks, at the very least, is trying to find ways to dramatically improve this team.
100%. And it's good to hear that these are at least things being floated out here. We're going to be back after free agency wraps, or, usually this stuff comes really fast and furious around 6 p.m. on Thursday. So we'll try to record as soon as we have a really good idea of the landscape. Thanks again for everyone that jumped in and commented on the YouTube. And thanks for everyone that's been listening to the podcast. Numbers been insane this week. Awesome stuff rolling through the off season. Make sure you like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure you subscribe on YouTube as well.
Get the job done, Sean Marks. That's it for me.
One of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.